On this Erasing Shame episode, I'm still DJ Chuang. I'm with my co-host from season 5, Lee Sandoval, and today's topic is postpartum depression. So it's something that many moms, even Asian American Christian ones, go through and experience after giving birth to a boy or girl or a baby. And as we were preparing for this a minute ago, I said, I don't know how to talk about this. So Hannah's going to do most of the talking, and I'll do the post-production and try to add a little bit of commentary here and there and make it conversational. So Hannah, welcome back to Erasing Shame.
Thank you.
And thank you for sharing your story about what is postpartum depression and how you experienced it.
Yeah. So I'm a mother of two beautiful Latasian children. My husband's Latino, I'm Asian, so Latasian. My son is going to be 4 next month, and my daughter is now almost 10 months. So I gave birth in January this year with COVID. um,
Mm.
and so with my son, I experienced postpartum depression. Um, I feel like it actually started to come on that last trimester. I could start feeling my body and my mood and everything kind of being a little bit lower.
Mhm.
Because, the first time you're expecting a child, there's so much excitement. And I had a ton of anxiety just because I didn't know how to raise a child.
Mhm.
But I was so weirded out, I think, and discouraged that as I got closer to giving birth, and at that point, I'd been Googling literally like 2 hours a night, everything about how to keep a baby alive. So yeah, I felt pretty armed with like information, but I started to feel myself emotionally getting flat. And I thought, oh, I'm just tired and nervous, and my body is just tired, and I have aches and pains and sciatic nerve stuff going on. And I'm, not sleeping and peeing every 2 hours or less. Really, actually, peeing every 15, 20 minutes. Life is just uncomfortable for a while. But once I gave birth, there was so much excitement, also some trauma because we had some health stuff going on, and my son was in the NICU for half a week, and just like some poor communication from the doctors. Even once we got home, I realized that I was feeling kind of flat and tired. And this was like right before Thanksgiving. So, what should have been an incredibly joyous celebratory time around the holidays, I internally was feeling very like that. And the combination, I think, of having been predisposed to depression. So, for all y'all out there, if
Mm.
there's a history of depression, anxiety, even before
Mhm.
getting pregnant and having the baby, then people like me, you and I are more likely to get postpartum. And I already knew that. So I was already watching for the signs. And they ask you in the prenatal appointments now. So I started to feel that, and I was like, oh, great. Like, not great, but like, okay, it's happening. So part of it was, I think everything else was like the low mood. I was attributing it to just being tired and sore. And,
Mhm.
women take 6 weeks to initially stop the bleeding, minimum 6 weeks.
Mm.
But they say the full recovery, mind, body, soul, it takes years, right? Um,
Mm.
and that's barring any like serious complications, which a lot of women have. So I'm very fortunate. I had a natural birth, and I recovered relatively quickly physically. But I realized that I wasn't able to bond with my son. Like, I looked at him and I knew I cared for him and would do anything to protect him. But if somebody said, "Do you love your son?" my response probably would have been, "Can you define love for me?" Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be feeling as a new mom and being like responsible for this little, cute little bundle of craziness. I don't know what I'm supposed to be feeling. And that really, really is depressing because I thought and I expected I'd be feeling, what on the movies or in books or what I've heard from other people of like overwhelming love. And it's like someone took your heart out and grew limbs, and it's like, walking out there in the world. Like, I was like, I'm not feeling any of that. On top of that, my son didn't smile until he was like 3 months. So it's like 90 days of like not sleeping, dealing with all the baby stuff, just so much anxiety. Like, are we doing this right? Are we going to hurt him? My husband went through it with me. I mean, I was just yelling and irritable and snapping all the time, telling him he was doing everything wrong, mostly because it was my own anxiety. But I realized in retrospect that my mood being so low, it was a lot longer than it should have been. So if it was just baby blues, so I'll read some kind of quick facts. So approximately 10 women will experience postpartum depression. That's a lot of women, right? So on top of that, the most recent studies actually say 1 in 7. I
Mm,
personally think that I it's much higher, especially after the
mm,
pandemic, especially
mhm,
after people of color had to deal with, the
mhm,
murder of George Floyd and what does it mean to be a person of color now, and the Atlanta
mhm,
shootings, right? Is now suddenly being a mom, it got scarier and harder, right?
mhm.
And then me having had COVID while I gave birth to my daughter, oh man, I
Wow.
was just like, that was a very different experience from the first one because I didn't have COVID with my son.
Mhm.
I feel like it's probably closer to 1 in 4, honestly. Um,
Wow.
so postpartum depression generally lasts 3 to 6 months, but it can vary.
Mhm,
Um, I feel like when you pass that 6 month threshold, hopefully by that time you're figuring out sleep with the baby, whether or not you're sleep training, just baby's sleep starts to get a little bit different and a little bit more steady, hopefully, minus the sleep regressions. But um, a lot of women, I feel like once we kind of start off with postpartum, especially with that first child, it is so hard because you don't know what normal looks like anymore. And raising a baby for the first time is extremely hard. It's scary. We went to the ER so much for things that now we would not imagine going to the ER, because we just had no idea what we were doing, right? Not only that, but I think postpartum depression is this, it's almost like a heavy cloud that's always on top of you. And you're always tired, right? You're always kind of not hungry, but something inside you feels empty and heavy. And it's almost like, if my shirt was cold all the time and wet and bad smelling, like it's just this like kind of feeling. But on the outside, the hard part is, especially as Asian American Christian women, there's so much pressure to go to church and smile, right? And me being an extrovert with ADHD, I'm an ENFP on the Myers-Briggs. I'm like, people, sunshine, warmth, yay, relief. Everybody wants to hold my baby, yay. Ah, catch my breath. But if I was an introverted woman, right, or a T on the Myers-Briggs and a J, I probably would have been like, oh my God, I have to go to church and smile. Like, I didn't go to church for, I think, the first 5 months because I was like, I had a baby. I don't want to see people. I look and feel nasty. But once we started to go, I imagine if I had a different personality, it would have been really hard to be around people and be like, I'm still feeling really low. I'm tired. I'm cranky. I cannot focus on the sermon. I do not want to hear half of the things he's saying because it just makes me feel bad. A big part of postpartum depression is guilt. And moms who don't have postpartum depression feel guilty anyway. So having PPD on top of everything with the guilt and the lack of sleep is just so awful. So I have talked to both clients and colleagues and friends who have had PPD pretty bad, and postpartum depression also can lead into postpartum anxiety, which I kind of feel like, don't even call it postpartum anxiety, just call it anxiety because it's normal. And then there's also postpartum psychosis. So I have talked to somebody in particular I'm close with and love very much. She had this experience of, do I need to drown my baby because my baby's trying to kill me?
Oh
She had
my.
thoughts of, do I need to throw my baby down the stairs because otherwise
Wow.
something bad's going to happen? Right. So very, very scary thoughts. And if you meet her,
Mhm,
you'd be like, oh my God, you? Because she is like
mm,
this beautiful Asian American Christian, like just really fits into that perfect mold of like, oh my God, she's just
mhm,
such an amazing, happy, well adjusted,
mhm,
smart, great, successful person. I cannot imagine her having those thoughts, right? But she did and
Mm.
overcame them. Now her kids are doing great, right?
Oh
She's doing
goodness.
great,
Mm.
but that period was really tough. And I think there's more and more celebrities also coming out to say, I have PPD or I have other postpartum issues, right? So I think it's something that needs to be really normalized. Honestly, I
Yeah.
feel like it's I'm one of those people that's like expect the worst, but so prepare and expect the worst, but hope for the best. I don't know if that makes
Uh-huh.
me an optimist or a pessimist or what, but I really do hope for the best, but I always prepare for the worst, maybe because I'm a little of an anxious personality. I
Okay.
feel like though, as a clinician, maybe the safer side would be while we're doing all that perinatal, education and the doctors are doing the
Hmm.
stuff, don't just ask them a quick little questionnaire of have you been, to check for domestic violence, and then perinatal anxiety and depression. Perinatal
Hmm.
means before you give birth, but you're pregnant.
Hmm.
I think that doctors and nurses and midwives should be educating women, assuming that the woman will have it rather than assuming she won't have it. To say, hey, you're more likely to have it than not, especially now in our world,
Well,
2022, right? So
yeah,
when
now
I
that you've talked a bit of your experience, I'm
Mhm.
recalling the time I was a
Oh,
dad, a
yeah.
young dad, first time dad, first time and only time because I have one son who's 25. So 25 years ago, we were stepping into this entirely new life experience, and my parents and my in-laws, they were from the immigrant first generation Asian cultures, that they didn't really understand what we were going through, and we didn't know how to connect with what they were going through in such an overwhelming emotional time, because the mom has just exerted so much of her body and nutrition to give birth and create this new baby. And now the first 6 to 12 months, losing lots of sleep, which really messes with your mental health
Mhm, yeah.
to begin with.
Uh-huh.
And then anything else that might happen chemically and body and all of that, sometimes it takes the form of this postpartum depression, but definitely overwhelming, blanket statement. And then I'm the uncle of a new baby niece who's 8 months old now. And I know every month or so I check in. I got to visit my baby Cece twice so far, and they're just overwhelmed. They're overwhelmed, and that's pretty much the only word they have for it. And they're probably reluctant to get an official diagnosis, but
Yes.
what you've described is helpful to say,
Mhm.
hey, that is part of the human experience if you
Yeah.
run into it.
Yeah.
Now, if someone were to have that experience and went to get help, what kind of help is there for postpartum depression?
Yeah. So, um, I guess part of me is like, it's bittersweet to answer that question because there needs to be way
Mm,
more than there is. There is not enough. First of
okay.
all, there isn't enough awareness, right?
Well, I
Um,
figure if there's a diagnosis, there might be help.
yeah, there is, but I feel like because having gone through it twice myself, there isn't enough. And it's not normalized. So 50% of mothers with postpartum depression are not diagnosed with it. So there's a ton of women
Yeah,
out there who are
right.
suffering needlessly and not getting any
Hmm.
help
Hmm.
because they don't even know they
Yes.
have it.
Yes.
But one first thing is telling people, hey, recovery is possible, right? So 80%
Hmm.
of women with postpartum depression will achieve a full recovery, which is
Good.
great. Even without doing anything, a lot of people will just naturally because the hormones will balance out.
Mm.
Parenting will get easier as time passes for many people, not everybody. That kind of help out there. First of all, if your spouse knows or your partner knows, they can really watch out for you and be kind to you.
Mm.
If you're comfortable to share with your family members and relatives and friends, hopefully people can check in on you. So just the community rallying around you. Um,
Yes.
I feel like if churches and pastors and I don't I women's ministry leaders, if that is a separate ministry, churches often do meal trains, but they only last like a couple, like maybe a month or two sometimes.
Yeah.
But if the mom happens to have other issues and postpartum is one of them, depression is one of them,
Mhm.
maybe see if you can extend that meal train out for like the remainder of 6 months or a year, right? It's not going to kill
Mm.
people's budgets to do that in a large church.
Mhm.
Every member goes around buying them a meal once a week, once, right?
Mhm.
So simple supports like that. But there's also medication.
Mhm.
So I didn't know, and I wish I had known, and
Mm.
I wish someone had told me. But there are
Mhm.
two antidepressants that are very effective and safe to use during pregnancy. And I did a
Oh.
lot of
Mm.
research before I kind of started to explore that avenue with my
Mhm.
second one, because I got perinatal depression, which means that at 3 months pregnant with my daughter, I started to feel the symptoms come on, which was so surprising because I was like, "Oh, I thought this stuff happened later. I didn't realize it could also happen so early," right?
Oh.
To the
Mhm.
point where I wasn't taking care of myself. Like I wasn't eating
Yeah.
the right foods. I wasn't taking my
Oh.
vitamins. I just very low
Mhm.
mood, very low motivation. Um,
Mhm.
None of the excitement that I had from my son was there, right?
Mhm.
And I started to feel not myself very early on.
Mhm.
But letting people know, like, hey, if you have depression and it's like causing you to like not respond to your baby fast enough because you're like, huh, what?
Mhm.
My baby's crying? Oh, right. Because that happens to some people. Or,
Mhm.
oh my
Mhm.
God, my baby's crying and all I want to do is scream and run away and hide in a corner and drink a bottle of wine.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
Like, dude, try an antidepressant if you're open to that. Right. And if not that, electroacupuncture is also a very effective treatment. So
Mm.
it's just acupuncture, but then they can put little currents of electricity. That's been shown
Okay.
to have some improvement in mood and symptoms as well, and just letting people know what you need, right? I think even as simple as changing your diet to an anti-inflammatory diet could make a big difference. But making sure that you're getting everything that you need. Support groups are out there. I went to one for a few weeks, and honestly, because I'm a clinician, it was a little like hard to really participate. I feel like if I was in a support group that was maybe smaller, but was other clinicians and health
Mhm.
professionals
Mhm.
who are serving others while having my own symptoms, that would have been a little bit easier to engage. Not that I felt like I was better than these women or knew more, but it was weird to try and engage in a group where I was like, everything you're saying, I already know. Right? And I don't
Yeah,
want to go into.
there's something really useful and powerful and accessible about peer support groups.
Yeah, yeah, it's
And I'm going
super,
to
super
emphasize
helpful.
the word peer
Yes.
because you do
Yeah.
need people who understand your context and your
Yes.
background, especially if you have psychological training for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's like, I imagine if you're a doctor and then you go to another doctor who's trying to
Mhm.
treat you and they don't seem to know all that you know, it'd be like, forget it. I'm gonna treat myself, or I'm not gonna get treatment, or I have to find someone else.
Uh-huh.
It's a little bit of that feeling of like, oh, this isn't helping me because I've tried everything you're talking about and it hasn't worked. Right.
Mhm.
But if you're not a mental health clinician, please find a support group because it is so helpful to talk to people. And I eventually did find other therapists and other pastors who are like, yeah,
Good.
I've been somebody who serves others and teaches others, but it's so hard when I'm going through it myself, right?
Mhm.
So I'm so, so lucky. My supervisor, shout out to Hattie Lee of Oak and Stone Therapy. She had a really crazy experience. She has two kids as well who are young.
Wow.
She
Mhm.
totally just had my back, and really was like, take as long as you need for maternity leave, take care of
Mhm.
yourself. What do you need?
Mhm.
We will be there for you. And that
Mm.
grace from my own employer, who was also a mental health professional and a
Mm.
mom,
Mhm.
meant everything to me. So I was
Yes.
planning to rush back to work because of guilt for not being able to see my
Yes.
people. But her
Right.
grace enabled me to take the time to recover enough so
Mhm.
I could start to, take the right steps and
Mhm.
get back to my new normal, right? Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think with postpartum, it's something that we just need to like talk about. That's as important, and in general, postpartum care, right? It's not just that
Yes.
postpartum depression is something we need to learn about and treat. It's just generally our society does not care enough for women after we give birth
Yes.
And that means we're not
Mhm.
caring enough for the babies, because if mom is not well, baby will not be well. So the first thing I tell
Mm.
my clients is take care of you and ask your partner to help you take care of you and your community. And if you don't have one, let's
Mhm.
find you a community. Hospitals don't just
Yes.
have lactation circles where mothers can breastfeed and learn to breastfeed together, but they also have postpartum depression. They have so many different support groups where you'll find people just like yourself, right?
Mm.
With the exception of, and maybe I should start one, therapists with postpartum depression. Yeah, maybe it's just me. I just felt embarrassed to be a therapist who still needed help, right? And I shouldn't have, but that's just, what I was going through at the time. So,
Well,
yeah.
that's part of our mix here at Erasing Shame, that we're embarrassed and we're shameful about asking for help, which is
Yeah.
very much the first step.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so during the past 2 months, as I've refocused this conversation, is what is that barrier? And it often comes down to, for many people, the willingness to ask for help, because the subject, the person that's struggling,
Hmm.
has to take that step. No one else can take that step for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the idea of agency. It's the idea of, well, if you force someone, that's not really going to help because it's not going to stick. They're not going to do the hard work of recovery,
Yeah.
because it does require full participation to get well. And
100%.
so just speaking to that is so important. And then continue speaking to that so we understand,
Hmm.
which lowers the anxiety, lowers the fear, and helps us to begin navigating the resources and the help, and how others like me, or others who are not moms, and others who are part of the church community, can better pray, better
Hmm.
provide food,
Hmm.
and take care of things that they can take care of, that the mom doesn't have the capacity or the energy or the motivation
Yeah.
in that hard season, the first couple of years.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Absolutely.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. That reminds me, I'm gonna have to send some food to my sister-in-law.
And a gift certificate for a massage.
They're not into that,
Oh,
unfortunately, but
really?
I will get one for me.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that I didn't know is that dads can get postpartum depression too. Um,
Oh, how
yeah.
does that happen?
So, my husband, my dear, dear husband,
Mhm.
was very frustrated that he had depression along with me. But part of it
Mm,
was, we're going through the pandemic. His father
okay.
died, so my father-in-law passed
Oh,
during the pandemic. And then our toddler started to have some, stuff that we needed to attend to health-wise and
mhm,
behavior-wise. And so we were just kind of stressed and depressed, all of us, all three of us. Um, and then with my pregnancy and then giving birth, my husband kind of went through the pregnancy with me, right? And they
okay.
say that partners who are very attuned to each other and very close.
Mm,
Sometimes you
alright.
can more use the word enmeshed, but I would just say very close, very intimate, take on each other's stuff. So my husband started
Okay,
to take on my back pain
okay.
and my cravings and my weight gain. And I was like,
Amazing.
oh, even my nausea at one point. We had to pull over and I was like, oh my God, I'm the pregnant one. Why are you throwing up? Why are you
Mhm.
gagging right now? It was really
Wow.
funny. And I kind of
Mhm.
like I kinda teased them a little meanly about it, but now I'm like, "Oh," it wasn't until somebody said, "Oh, he must be very attuned to you," a midwife. A midwife said, "Oh, it happens when
Okay.
you're very close," right? And
Yeah,
also
yeah.
because he was already going through some other things, it just amped, I think, his experience. So when we gave birth, I mean, it was so wonderful, but he was still going through his stuff and also
Mm,
going through stuff with me, right? So in
mhm.
that case, if both of you have postpartum depression, know that it's okay. Men can have postpartum depression. When
Yes,
there aren't as many supports for men as there are for women, and we already know there's not enough for women. So I
yes.
do think that there need to be more resources for dads who have postpartum depression, right? To normalize
Mhm.
it and to say like, "Hey, dude, like it's okay, being a dad is hard and it's scary, and when you're going through a lot of the mental, emotional stuff, your wife is, but you're not the one who gave birth. There's also a lot of shame about that, but it's actually
Yes.
quite normal, and it's also a sign that
Mhm.
you love your wife very much and you
Mhm.
care a lot about your wife, and so there's nothing truly to be ashamed about, but we understand that it can be embarrassing for men in general to admit any
Yes.
weakness.
Yes.
you know.
Right.
But the
And
best
Asian
thing for
men
baby is
especially.
always happy mom, and happy mom's partner.
Good.
Yeah.
And that's good. That's a good thing. Keep in mind, it affects other people too. So,
Yes. Oh my
especially
God.
the baby. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and I guess this is kind of a weird note, but I stopped
Yes.
reading the news because they were just I don't know if it's my algorithm. I listen to the news on NPR, but I stopped
Mm-hmm.
reading news on my phone, the Apple News, because my algorithm for some reason was pulling up a lot of like children dying and
Oh
babies
my.
dying. Yeah, I don't
Mm.
know why, because I really avoid those, and I always do the thumbs down sign.
Mm-hmm.
But, when I realized, oh my God, that mom probably had postpartum psychosis, that mom probably
Mm-hmm.
had postpartum depression or anxiety, and it just got
Mm-hmm.
really bad. And that's why she killed her
Oh
kid,
goodness.
right?
Oh
Ah,
goodness.
so
Mm-hmm.
heartbreaking. Because I'm like, how many
Yes.
gatekeepers and care providers had she crossed paths with who could have said, ma'am, are you doing okay? When's the last time you
Mm-hmm.
showered? When's the last time you ate? How are your
Mm-hmm.
finances? How are you doing? Like, how are you really doing? Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I want to be one of those people who, whenever I see a woman with a baby or kids, just kind
Mm-hmm.
of like take an extra close look to be like, is she okay?
Yes.
And even I was at IKEA and I approached a complete stranger who just her stroller fell down, her kids were crying, all of her stuff was on the ground, and I was just like, "Are you okay? Like,
Mm-hmm.
can I support you in any way?" And she was very, I think, embarrassed by my doing this. She's like, I'm fine, everything's fine." But I was like, "Okay, well, I'm here." I didn't mean to stalk her, but I did kind of like watch her for a little bit and try and, just make sure she was
Yeah.
really okay. Yeah.
Well,
So watch out for the
yeah.
young moms out there, just the moms out there with kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm wondering how I could have approached that situation a little differently to get a
Mm,
different result. Like
mm,
I used to be a dad with a young child, and I can relate to some of the struggle to
yeah.
try to bring some empathy in to
Right.
say, or I don't know if you would want to say I'm a counselor, but that you have two young kids too, and
Yeah. Yeah.
some way to again always to look for opportunities to show kindness, empathy, and care
Mhm.
in whatever
Mhm.
situation we're in, but particularly here as we're talking about postpartum depression, that
Yeah.
it is a very lonely journey,
Mhm.
especially when we don't hear much about it, and we
Yeah.
definitely can use more help and conversation. So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, every mom just needs to be told, any school age kids, right? Or just kids under 18. Every mom just needs to be told, hey, you're doing a great job, right?
Mm,
Because we
hmm.
all always feel like we're failing somehow in some area. There's always a sense
Hmm.
of inadequacy and fear and anxiety and guilt. I think that's just a part of being a mom. But,
Well,
every mom just
perfectionism
needs
is
to be told,
such a tyrant.
yes, yes, yeah. But we're all doing the best we can given the resources we have and the knowledge
Yes,
we have.
good word, good word. Well, thank you, Hannah. It's
Yeah.
great
Mm.
chatting with you again and again. We're going to wrap up this episode of Erasing Shame. Connect with us at erasingshame.com, and we'll add a few links in the show notes, help you in your journey as you run into young moms that may experience postpartum depression. Thank you for tuning in. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to the Erasing Shame podcast. Check out the show notes at erasingshame.com and subscribe to our email for updates. We would love to hear from you, so please add your comments at our website or on social. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any podcast app, and you can also subscribe on YouTube or follow on Facebook. Please add a rating and review so we can reach more people with our message of health, hope, and compassion. This podcast is the digital outreach of Christian Asia Mental Health. Please consider partnering with us by making a tax-deductible donation at erasingshame.com, and together we can resolve the mental health crisis for every person. Thank you.